Welcome to you. Thank you for having me again. I wanted to share something really quick that's not related to my passage at all. But whenever I'm asked if I am nervous or scared to preach, I always have the same response. And it is, yes, I am. And the main reason I have to be nervous is that I always have this fear that I'm going to share something that's of me and not of God, and that I'm going to make a mess of things, and then someone's going to be very confused, and I will have led someone in the wrong direction. And I had this fear this week leading up to this, and I finally it hit me, I think it was yesterday, no, Friday, because yesterday was Saturday. Friday, we were doing something called Emmanuel journaling in the morning, which is where you write down, there's like a list of 6 or 7 things, and you write down God's response to how you're feeling. And so I wrote that I was feeling nervous and scared about messing up and saying something wrong. And then what I had in my heart, I heard God say that that your strength is not what you need my strength, and that I'm going to be speaking to someone's heart, not like you aren't speaking to anybody's heart. It's me working through you. And so if I say something wrong or if I mess up, it doesn't matter, because the Holy Spirit is here and He's in your hearts, and He will get the message across, I hope. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Philip Beatty. This is my wife, Lexi. Nope, she's not here. She is hosting a bachelorette party right now in Columbus for Sarah, her younger sister, who's getting married in a couple weeks. She really wished she was here. A really quick update, we are pregnant, if you guys did not know that. We are 30 weeks pregnant, so we've got about 10 more to go, and so far everything's going well with baby and mom, and we're just really excited to meet our little daughter. Now you guys all know. But when I was asked to come share for Mission Sunday, it was to share about what Lexi and I have been doing for the past 4 months, since August, end of July. We were the youth pastors here for a couple years, and we got offered a position at Rosedale International. Rosedale International is the missional arm of the CMC conference, so the Conservative Mennonite Conference, and you've got a Bible college called Rosedale Bible College, and then you've got Rosedale International. So I have a quick map to show you. Hopefully this makes sense. Perfect. So you've got Rosedale Bible College, which is kind of way out in the boonies in Plain City, and that is a Bible college that is about 2 years, and you can get degrees that lead into other programs, but it's a lot of Bible studies and theological debates and stuff. And then you have our Rosedale International Center, which is not quite smack dab in the heart of Columbus, but pretty close. We're about like 7 or 8 minutes from the Nationwide building. So I wanted to quickly zoom in a little bit and talk about our building, the Rosedale International Center. This is our neighborhood. It's called Shepherd Neighborhood, and it was very strategic in where our building was placed. They were out in Plain City until about 2010, and then an opportunity came up to move into Columbus, and that feeds into the mission statement and the calling that Rosedale International has for the nations, for the people of the world. And the mission statement, I wrote it down so that I wouldn't mess it up, and if people are watching me from RI, I got it down. So it's to fully engage our churches in maturing and multiplying disciples, especially among the least reached. And Shepherd Community is a place that is one of those least reached areas of Columbus. It has quite a bit of crime, quite a bit of poverty in it, and so it was very strategic in where it was placed. And if you're nerdy like me, you like to zoom in even more. And that is our building. So I outlined it with the yellow. That's all of our property. So whenever I tell people I'm in Columbus, they think I'm like right downtown and I have like skyscrapers all around me. That's not the case. We do have a little section of woods. I don't know if you can see. Can you see my mouse when I move it around? Nope. Okay. Should have brought a laser pointer. Oh well. That little area back in the woods there is really nice. We have a little fire pit, and there's actually a deer that lives in there. Her name's Ethel. She has 3 legs, and she does not move very fast, but she's there pretty much most of the time. And then we've got our building right here, and that is, it used to be a retirement home, old folks home, and has been retrofitted in 2010 to now host our teams. So we've got, just quickly, my apartment is right on this corner, and then this is like our office wing, And then these are like our conference rooms, kitchen, dining room area type of thing. Well, okay, I forgot, you can't see my mouse. Okay, so if you can see, right, that corner is my house, this one's the office, and that is the kitchen, dining room area. So we live right in the building with our participants, and it's definitely been a growing and stretching thing to live at your work. I don't know a lot of people who live where they work, but I can just get out of my, walk out of my apartment and I'm right in my office space pretty much. So it's been really interesting to try to create boundaries with that, because if we're living on the center and we're walking around, we can hear what's going on and we're always there. So it's been really good for Lexi and I to figure out boundaries of when is ministry time, when is personal, we need to rest time, and just figuring out those lines has been something that we've really been growing in since August. So I kind of mentioned that Rosedale International is the missional arm of the CMC conference, and within that there are two branches or two different streams. So you've got Rosedale International, which is our long overseas missionary support network. So that supports David and Emily, who are in North Africa, and I think their name are Jacob and Carly. They're in, I think, Indonesia or Asia somewhere. So we've got RI that deals with our long-term missionaries, and then we've got the STP program, or Short Terms Programs Department. And that is where Lexi and I are working. We are in the Short Terms Programs Department. So we don't really have a whole lot to do with the overseas missionaries, but what we do end up doing is generating a younger generation that then possibly feeds into the RI, or the overseas missionary work. One of our interns, actually really cool, interns from last year, she just finished in December. She's actually going back to Thailand. She just got accepted to go back to Thailand for a term, so that was really exciting because she went through REACH, then she went through internship, and now she is continuing on in her pursuit of the least reached people groups. So that was really encouraging for me to see that she did finally get accepted. So within our short terms program department, we have 3 different programs that we run throughout the course of the year. And some are overlapping. So we have our internship program, which just started. Does anyone remember Jared? You guys should all remember Jared. You remember Jared? It's only been a week. But anyways, he has just come down to Columbus to join our internship team. So we have 5 interns this year some of them are from this area, one is from Alaska, and then one is from pretty much the New York, Pennsylvania state line. And what they end up doing for this internship is they come in January and they stay with us living in the building. They live downstairs. They stay with us up until December, and they help us host groups, or they help us host our programs that I'm going to talk about a little bit later. But one of the really cool things is that we provide them with skills training, if I can say it that way. So we have specific positions that they would help with. So we have a food services assistant who helps in the kitchen. We've got a facilities assistant, which is Jared, who helps maintain the cars, and he cuts the grass, and he changes light bulbs, and kind of whatever he can learn on the job. We've got each position has a supervisor, so they have someone who can direct them. So it's really cool because not only are they growing in their spiritual lives and growing as people, but they're also learning these important, valuable life skills that they can then take back to future work if they want to continue on in that field. And then we have our City Challenge program, and I think I'll just go through these pictures while I'm going through them because it will make a lot more sense. So City Challenge is our, who's that guy? Who are those guys? Those look pretty cute. Anyways, our City Challenge program is when we have groups that come through in the summertime. They're youth groups that come through for a week at a time, and they go through half a day of sessions and Bible study and structured quiet times. And then in the afternoon, they either do service projects, or I said I was going to go through these pictures, and I totally didn't. So they go through sessions and do a lot of worship, structured Bible studies. They do service projects in the afternoons. Sometimes that involves going to communities, immigrant communities, and just hosting a fun summer activity like spike or kickball or something like that. Oftentimes they just take huge cooler freezies and just hand freezies out willy-nilly. One of the other activities that is really important to City Challenge is enabling youth to grow in their spiritual strength and their spiritual courage. And so oftentimes what we do is we just walk around Columbus and we pray for people. We have a day called the Prayer Challenge. Do you guys all remember that? How many of you guys still have sore feet from that? No? It's pretty much like you just walk from morning until afternoon, and you are supposed to look for people who are homeless that you can pray for, that you can share a meal with. Look at these studs. Oh, yeah. The guy checking out the camera right there, Jackson. Yeah. Also, I have some throwback pictures. I don't know if anybody here is in these throwback pictures, but I think their parents are here. So we have some old faces who used to come through City Challenge. We do like sports activities with them. Oh, yeah, that's the picture I wanted to show. We got the smolder from Andre, the thumbs up from Jackson, and all the rest of them looking like they're enjoying their ice cream. But we do have a lot of fun activities. Those usually happen in the afternoons, and our structured Bible study sessions happen in the morning. Ooh, there we go. There's another throwback. It's evidence that Donnie does do dishes. Donnie, I know you do dishes. But anyways, so that leads into our next program, which is our REACH program. So our REACH program starts in August, and it goes about the same duration as a school year. So you start in August, and you do 3 months of discipleship training at our center, and then you do 6 months at another outreach location. Oftentimes that means that they go to different countries. However, the past couple years have been pretty tricky with travel, so a lot of our stuff has been in states. So we have 3 teams now. We've got 1 to Albuquerque, New Mexico. We've got 1 to Phoenix, Arizona, and we've got 1 to Albania. And I'm not sure what town they're in because they're moving around. But if you ever have a thought and remember my message today, lift these guys up to prayer. They've only been there since the beginning of December, so it's still really new, and 2 of the teams all got COVID, so that was kind of stressful for them because they were locked inside their house, and they were starting to get these feelings of, if God called me into ministry, if God called me to this group of people that I'm supposed to share with, then why the heck am I locked in my room just reading books because I can't go outside? So if you can lift them up in prayer, that'd be really good. It's been encouraging to hear some of the things that they've been going through, but what we do with REACH is that it essentially follows a similar pattern to City Challenge in that we do a lot of worship, so every day a different team leads worship. This time Lexi was helping. We do activities. This was a blindfolded, what was it called, obstacle course that I came up with. This was really funny. I should have gotten a video of it because there was a lot of screaming going on. These 2 pictures kind of show what this year's DTS is what we call them, a discipleship training school. This is what they were really into. They do puzzles a lot, play games, snack around, and we've got a bike trail that they can go bike on. We do a lot of activities together outside. So the one on the left is our, what is that called? World Awareness Week. Thanks, Brennan. World Awareness Week. I know you didn't say anything, but Brennan went through REACH. So if you want to ask him any questions that I don't fill in the gaps, he can fill in the gaps. So World Awareness Week is where they go through a week that simulates how most people would live. So it often means that they just eat rice and beans 3 times a day for 5 days. And they're not allowed, there's no electricity, hot showers get turned off, that kind of stuff. We kind of did a similar one with our youth group a couple years ago. It was fun to go outside and take bucket baths with the boys, but and then the one on the right is we had a fire for guys' night. So I'm just going to skip through these because they're just all activities. But one of the things we really enjoy about DTS is that Lexi and I get to be involved in a lot of their sessions, but then also in their activity side of things. So it kind of feeds into my heart for digging into the Bible, but also kind of that childhood heart that I have of just I love to have fun and I love to mess around. And then Lexi really loves decorating. So this was our Thanksgiving dinner that we had right before they left to go home. And we decorated it all really nicely. They had a big 3-course meal and played some games. And it's just been really cool to see both Lexi and I's strengths as a couple and then also as individuals growing. And I've been sharing with a number of people that I'm regretful that I haven't learned some of the things that I've learned in the past 4 months, like sooner. Like, I don't know why it took me so long to figure out some of these things about relationships between man and wife, but also just my relationship with God and how he sees me and how I can use that to share with people. So I want to go into what I'm going to be talking about today. And before I do that, I want to do an activity because you guys have been listening to me talk for a little while, and I know that's boring. So let's get the left side of the room to stand up. Left side, sorry. Your left is different from my left. Let's get this side of the room to stand up. Okay, now I want the first 3 rows to sit down. Okay, now I want the people on this side of the room to look at the people on that side of the room. Okay, that signifies the amount of people in the world that are unreached, that have less than 2% of Christians within their populations. Isn't that crazy? 45% of the world does not know who Jesus is. Isn't that crazy? Doesn't that just like blow your mind? You guys can sit down, sorry. That was it. It wasn't a whole lot of activity, but isn't that just crazy that like 45% of the world does not know who Jesus is? And doesn't that call out to your hearts of, I got to share this. I got to like be empowered to go out and tell people about God. Like if you have a testimony of something that God's done in your life, something that he's worked on in your life, then share that with someone because they possibly have gone through the same thing. And so today what I'm going to be talking about, I have a quick picture. This signifies the map of the world where the least reached people groups are. So as you can see, it's mostly sub-Saharan Africa, right along the top there, North Africa, the Middle East, and then down through Asia as well. So that's where most of our long-term missionaries are. We have quite a couple in Morocco, which is in North Africa. We have some in Thailand and India and Bangladesh. And also, really fun fact, just because you guys might not know this about me, I grew up in West Africa until I was 18, and I lived right there, right on the very tip, not the one that's out in the, I don't know what that is, but the one back from that. The very tip of West Africa is where I grew up. So fun fact, now you know that. So today I'm going to be talking about our calling to multiply. That was kind of the mission statement for RI, and it's definitely been a mission statement for me as I've been growing in that, growing and learning about it. So today I'm going to be sharing very strictly because I've been taking a speech class with the interns, or we will be taking a speech class, and I've been reading through or watching the videos, and he's been challenging me in how I share because he says that a message, when you're trying to have a conversation with someone, it should be a bullet, not buckshot. So you shouldn't like shoot out as much as you can and just hope you get a bird. You need to like really like aim in at it. And so I have an objective that I want to kind of reach at the end of this message. And if you look on the back of your bulletins, you should have something that looks like this, except it won't have the answers, but this. If you'd want to fill that out, you totally can. If you don't, that's also fine. You can make paper airplanes out of it. I don't care. But the objective that I'm going to be trying to reach today is that if we are called to multiply the kingdom here on earth, then our lives should reflect that calling, and then it should be able to be seen through our words and deeds or actions. You can put whichever one you want there. And so I guess those are my 3 points that I'm going to be talking about today. What is that calling in our life? How can that look like? How does that reflect itself? And then what are some practical ways? And if you are someone who likes to know, okay, when do I have to pay the most attention? Pay the most attention to the last one. The application one is definitely more where my heart is at, but I wanted to lay a foundation to get to that point. So the primary calling that we have is in Genesis. Oftentimes when we think of commissioning or we think of sending out to the nations, who automatically thinks of the Great Commission as the first one? Oh, there's not a whole lot of you. Wow, you guys should have come up here and shared my message. Usually when I hear of someone tell me that I need to go reach the nations, I automatically go to the Great Commission that Jesus sends us out. But if you look back to Genesis, if you look back to the very first book of the Bible, God's calling, God's heart was always I did not do that, I promise. God's calling was always to bring people to himself. That was always his original intention, was to bring the nations to himself. And he just goes, in the Old Testament, he goes about doing this through the family of Abraham, who later becomes the nation of Israel. And so I want to read this and draw out some truths that I think are really important to hold in our hearts. So if you want to turn to Genesis 12, I'm just going to read verse 1 through 3, or you can follow along, unless this thing keeps blinking. The Lord said to Abram, "Leave your native country, your relatives, and your father's family, and go to the land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make you famous, and you will be a blessing to others. I will bless those who bless you, and curse those who treat you with contempt. All the families on earth will be blessed through you." I think the point I want to draw out of this passage is the sequence of his calling to Abraham. So he doesn't say to Abraham, "Bless people, and then I will bless you." Does anyone notice that he says that he's going to bless him first, and then through that, Abraham is then going to be a blessing to the nations? I think sometimes in our minds, we often get into this works-based mentality, and it's something that we've seen a lot of in our center. We have a week during Reach where we just literally spend 3 days from breakfast until dinner having what I like to call spiritual therapy. It's essentially where one person sits up on a chair, everyone else is on couches or is coloring. You don't really have to be paying total attention to the person. But one person sitting on a chair in the middle, and then you got a couple people on either side of them, and they essentially just go through and they go through all these lies that person has believed about themselves. Or they go through some of the things, the hurts in that person's life that have led them to maybe shut off parts of their heart to people, or have misconceptions about who God is. And I think this is one that pops up, is that I have to do something in order for God to then do something for me. Instead of realizing that God has already done something for us, he's already blessed us, and then it's out of that blessing, it's not out of a sense of guilt, not out of a sense of I need to do this or else, it's out of a sense of thankfulness, of I've got all of this, why wouldn't I want to share this with somebody? And it's really cool that he brings it at the very beginning of the Bible of saying, this is my calling to Abraham, this is my calling to the Israelites, and I think it has definitely changed my perspective on how I read the Old Testament, because now I read the Old Testament, and every time there's something that comes up that's a little wonky, some of the stories in the Old Testament can blow your mind a little bit, but anytime I come up against something like that, I go back to this, and I'm like, okay, so that's what God was doing through this story. He was trying to bring the nations back to himself. He was trying to create worshipers for himself. And if you're anything like me, you often think that the Israelites and Abraham were some other people group, and I don't jump into the story until, like me as a Gentile, I don't jump into the story until the New Testament, when Jesus comes and dies. That's when my story begins. But if you read in Galatians, it actually says that as Abraham believed in God, it was credited to him as righteousness. Understand then that those who have faith are children of Abraham. Isn't that crazy? We're all children of Abraham. If we have faith, we are children of Abraham, meaning that first blessing, that first calling to bless the nations was us. So when you look at the Old Testament, instead of reading that as some other people group's story, now try to read the Old Testament of, oh, that's like my story. That is my history. I mean, you might not be a Jew in the traditional sense, but we are children of Abraham if we have faith. And with that, I have another activity. So, would you guys like to watch a creepy version of a song or a really like hip version of a song? I have two versions, and I wanted to let you guys choose. Creepy. All right, we're going to do this. I don't even know what the term for this is, but we're going to do it based on how loud you cheer, okay? So let's say creepy. Okay, so it's hip. Hip, does everyone want hip? Okay, we'll do the hip one. And you guys can stand up and dance if you'd like to. Somehow I don't believe that many people will dance, but I was going to get the youth to do this, and they did not want to, so I don't know why, but yeah, shocker, right? Too cool for dancing to kids' songs. Okay, are we ready back there? This was really loud when we tested it out this morning, so. Oh yeah. Just dance right off the stage.
Father Abraham had many sons, had Father Abraham.
You guys definitely picked the right one. The other one was really weird. It's like people in full pillowcases. Okay, that's about enough. You guys get the picture. I was going to go through the rest of it, but that's pretty much all I wanted to touch on. And I think I used to sing that song a lot as a kid, and it never really stuck out to me that that's what that song is talking about. Is that Abraham is my father. I'm a son of Abraham if I have faith and I believe in God, and that means that calling that God placed on Abraham should apply to my life as well. And Lexi drew something else out. If you don't know anything about Lexi, she is really good at worship. She used to be a worship leader here for years and years. And when I played her this song, she started laughing because it's really weird. But then she drew out the point that the song goes on to talk about like using your entire body. So it says left arm, right leg, left leg. Then you like start shaking your head and twisting around and stuff. And it's calling us to use our entire bodies to praise, our entire bodies to worship God. And I just think that's an interesting picture that she drew out of that. And so we've been looking at this calling on our life of multiplication. And I want to look at how that could look like in our life in today's day and age. So if you want to turn to Hebrews 10, verses 19 through 25, I'm going to share a little bit about that. And I'm running out of time, so I'm going to read it and then just pull out my favorite point, because there's a lot that's really good in there. And if you'd want to, as I'm reading and you want to write it down, the blue ones are the things that we can do as a response, and the red ones are the ones that Christ has done for us. So if you want to write those down as you go along on the back of your paper, you should have a little space for that. Sorry if it's really tight. I write really small, so whenever I come up with these, I'm like never good enough at giving space for people. But anyways, I'm going to read Hebrews 10, verses 19 through 25. And so, dear brothers and sisters, we can boldly enter heaven's most holy place because of the blood of Jesus. By his death, Jesus opened a new and life-giving way through the curtain into the most holy place. And since we have a great high priest who rules over God's house, let us go right into the presence of God with sincere hearts, fully trusting him. For our guilty consciences have been sprinkled with Christ's blood to make us clean, and our bodies have been washed with pure water. Let us hold tightly, without wavering, to the hope we affirm, for God can be trusted to keep his promise. Let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works, and let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. Okay, I said I was only going to pull out one point, but this is so good. I can't not pull out these other points. I think one of the ones that I really enjoyed was this holding tightly without wavering to the hope we affirm. Does anyone remember what Jimmy shared 2 Sundays ago? Does anybody remember what analogy did Jimmy use in his message 2 weeks ago? Did anyone say it? A rope. Does anyone remember that story of if you're in the water and you're drowning and someone throws a rope to you, are you not going to hold on to that rope as tightly as you possibly can? It's a really good message. If you have a chance, I would highly suggest going back and watching that or asking him about it. But that picture of holding on unwaveringly or without wavering to the hope that we affirm. And I think the next part of that verse is really interesting. For God can be trusted to keep his promise. And that's something that if you read the Old Testament, which I'm starting to do a little bit more and more because we do some Bibles, we're taking a perspectives course that goes through the entire Bible and kind of pulls apart some of the narrative. But if you look at the Old Testament with this idea that God is constantly fulfilling his promises, he promises to bless Abraham, and he does that so many times over and over and over again. And the interesting thing is that he creates that promise and that blessing with each of Abraham's descendants. So he says the same thing to Isaac, and then he says the same thing to Jacob again. So it's cool that even here in Hebrews. Even here in Hebrews, he's drawing back to that original promise of that God is going to bless you and he's going to keep his promises. And then the last point that I really want to draw out is kind of these two together, which I guess you can't see my mouse, that let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works, and let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another. And this is something that we've been doing quite a lot at Rosedale International. We have this vision of what small church is. And essentially what that means is a small church is just a house that has maybe 3 or 4 families. It tends to work better when it's smaller. The president of our organization, Joe Showalter, he has organized this. It's called the Columbus Network of Micro Churches, CNMC. I'm really bad at acronyms, and there are so many at Rosedale International. But he has created this network of churches that just meet in people's houses. And essentially what they do is they come in, they have a meal together, and then after the meal, they go through a time called, we call sachet, which is just a time of debrief where you get past the stage of just saying, how are you? Oh, I'm fine. How are you? I'm fine. How are you? And then you get in this weird. Has anyone ever done that where they get in this weird circle of just repeating, oh, how are you? I'm fine. How are you? I'm fine. It happens to me all the time, and I laugh all the time. But what they do with this sachet is that it takes it past that surface level and goes deep into the relationships and connects your heart. And so what you do is you share. Here are the words sachet. Another acronym. It stands for sad, angry, scared, happy, excited, and tender. So what you do is everyone in the group goes around in a circle, and they pick one word or 2 words that apply to them, and then they share why they're feeling that way. So it gets past the just I'm fine and kind of creates a way to open up a little bit more conversation. And then what they do in their church is they go around, everyone shares, and if someone shares something that they're really struggling with or they're scared about, they stop right there and they pray for the person. So instead of the easy thing that we sometimes say of, oh, I'll pray for you, and then you walk away, they do it right there, if the person is comfortable with it. Obviously, if they feel uncomfortable getting prayed over in that large setting, they don't force them to it. But it's just a really cool way of really keeping things intentional and keeping things present and in the moment. And then what they do is they go into a time called manuscript Bible study, which I actually have a copy of a manuscript Bible study. And what that is you have a piece of scripture that is written or formatted as it would have been back in the Old Testament. So it's just written line by line. There's no verses, there's no headings, so you don't get any preconceived notions of what the passage is going to be on. And then you just read it, and it's all on. One of the key things about a manuscript Bible study is that it's on a piece of paper. So you get a little piece of paper, depends on how long your manuscript Bible study is. Sometimes they can go for 3 hours, sometimes they can go for half an hour. It all depends on how much scripture you want to go through. But you get a piece of paper that looks like this. So it's got just 1, 5, 10 line numbers so that you can once you start discussing it, you can have a reference point. But essentially what you do is you go through and you write on the piece of paper. You highlight things that interest you, you write questions, you highlight things that you don't like maybe, and then at the end, you just answer some very simple questions. There's no one person leading, there's no preacher necessarily. Everyone gets involved in the process. And it only happens once you've checked in and you've gotten your hearts on the same level. And then you ask the questions, what do you like? What does this passage tell us about God? What does this passage tell us about how God sees us? And then how can I apply this passage to my life? And the really cool thing is that you don't need a prep for it. The person who's leading the manuscript Bible study just has to print out enough manuscripts for everyone, and then they just show up, read, take 15, 20 minutes by yourself to read it over, write your questions, highlight your things, come back together, and you just have a discussion. There's no right or wrong answer. There's no one person over another one. Everyone's at the same level. And so I have copies that I printed out, and if you're an impact group leader and you are interested in grabbing one at the end of the sermon, please come up to me. I have about 10. If there's more than that, I can send you guys emails. But another activity, I want you guys to practice this sachet right now. So what I'm going to do is give you guys 5 minutes, turn to the person next to you, or if you want to turn around and have a group of 4, don't try to make it more than 5 or 6 because it just gets a little uncomfortable when there's that many people that you don't know. But if you want to turn around or turn to the person next to you, I want you to take 5 minutes to share sachet together. Share one of these words together, and after you've done that, you can share what God is teaching you today or what he's been teaching you this week or in your life. It's however long you want to go. Share something that God's been placing on your heart, and then once you are finished with sashaying, sharing something that God's placed on your heart, turn and just pray for one another. Ask a really quick, how can I pray for you this week? And then pray together. So I'm going to give you guys about 5 minutes to do that. And go. Good? Cool. Awesome. Guess what? You guys can keep doing that. This doesn't have to just be a church thing. This can be a life thing. You can take that to your impact groups. You can take that to your work situations when you're working with your dudes at work or gals at work, whatever situation you're in. You can take that method of debriefing and getting on that heart level and then just asking, how can I pray for you? Something that I've really grown to love and understand down in Columbus. So I want to finish up with the next steps. So what can we do about this? How do we take this calling to multiply and what it looks like in our life of how we can trust and we can encourage and motivate one another? How can we take that into our everyday life? What are some practical ways? And I have it in 3 very simple things that we can do to build each other up, because I think sometimes when, especially when I'm sharing, and it's been really good to have Lexi kind of balance me out, but my gut reaction is always to let's send people. And Lexi really cares about people's hearts, and so she's been challenging me in understanding that before we send people, before we try to maybe leave this church and impact the world, maybe we need to first grow as a church. Maybe we have to grow our hearts closer to each other, create systems that allow us to just hold each other accountable to things and to be there for one another. Because how can we go and impact the world if we don't have a solid foundation here at this church? How can I share the love of God with that person out there if I'm not sharing the love of God with this person right here? It's definitely something that I've been growing in, and Lexi has helped me a lot with that. So I think one of the things I wanted to touch about is that we need to change our standards of success. And I wrote down I wrote this down as I was listening to worship this morning, which was awesome, by the way. Very good job. I wrote this quote down, that quality of meetings, number of attendance, and the amount of scripture reading is not a substitute for the quality of our meetings, the heart health of our attendance, and how much we understand the Bible. So let's translate that into saying that if I, as a group leader, if I have 10 events planned and everyone comes to all 10 events, but we're not connecting at all during those 10 events, then I don't think that's successful. I think if I were to go have one event and we were to really connect with each other, then that is maybe a different definition of success. So I guess I would just want to challenge you as you go out to think about, okay, what am I considering successful, and am I actually like helping and motivating each other to the good works that was talked about in Hebrews? The next thing that we have to do that kind of goes along with this standard of success, and I shared, or has you guys experienced it just a little while ago, is changing our language. That's something that I've really been challenged by with this new group of interns, and just in general, getting to those questions of, like, instead of just asking about how's work, like asking those questions, what is God sharing with you? Like, that's such an easy question, and if we're constantly growing and we're constantly hearing things from God, then if I come up to the same person like every day of the week and I ask the same question, it should be changing, because we should both be learning and growing and gaining a better understanding of God as we dig into his heart for us. I think it's something that I've been challenged with, because I love talking about video games and I love talking about movies and TV shows. I'm not so good about sports unless it's soccer, because I grew up playing soccer. Sorry, footballers. But like, I love talking about things that are good, but don't necessarily mean that I'm getting on the same heart level. And that's not to say that like it's not good to have those conversations. There's definitely a lot of time and place. That's where those are the things that build our relationships. But there definitely has to be also a balance of the deeper questions of, like, how are you doing in your heart? How are you seeing God right now? And how is he seeing you? That simple question can really open up someone's heart, and like, well, right now I don't feel like I am being seen by God. Right now I feel like he's left me alone, and I feel lonely, and I feel tender. One of those words we had was tender, which is just a feeling of confusion of, what am I doing? What is my purpose here on earth? And yeah, I think it's good to challenge each other and to grow in that. And the last point I have, which Kurt, you can bring your worship team up, is that we need to address the missing nutrients in our soil. And I pulled some of these points out of a book that I've been reading, a really good book. It's called Spiritual Multiplication in the Real World by Bob McNabb. If you enjoy reading books, it's really good. But it's talking about this idea of creating disciple makers, not just disciples. Because if you create a disciple, then it ends with that person. But if you create someone who is a disciple maker, then it can continue. And I had an image in my mind of this wave of, if you understand wave mechanics, like in the ocean, what is happening is that the water molecules are making a circular motion like this. And then once they come into shore, the ocean floor actually comes up and it stops that circular motion, and you get the half circle crest, and that's what you surf. And so it's this idea that like the water molecules are just bouncing and hitting each other. They're constantly making these circles that are hitting each other and moving on. And are you a wave joining in that, or are you the ocean floor that's just breaking your cycle? Are you bouncing against the person next to you so that they bounce off the person next to them and you can continue that wave to those least reached people groups? Or are you stopping the cycle at you? Are you just, stopping what God wants to continue doing? And so what he had a really interesting point with this one, he was talking about how he had a banana tree, and he transplanted it, and had the same amount of light, same amount of water, but all of a sudden his banana tree was not creating many bananas. And he was like, what the heck? It's getting the same amount of water, same amount of sun. But what he wasn't understanding was that the soil that he had planted this banana tree in wasn't giving it what it needed. And so I guess addressing that point in our church, in our small groups, or impact groups, in our lives, what are the missing nutrients in my soil? Am I missing community? Am I needing more community in my life? Am I missing those deep questions? Am I missing a time when I just quiet myself and spend time with God, where I'm not praying, I'm not listening to worship music, I'm literally just being? What are the things that are missing in our life? And I think that's what I want to share about today, or that's what I wanted to share about today, is just if we believe that we are called to multiply the kingdom on earth, how is that reflected in our life, and how is that seen? Are we connecting our hearts to one another so that we can then go on to reach those least reached people groups, or are we trying to impact the world without first solidifying our relationships with each other?